When Officer Mark and his K-9 partner Rex were sent into the mountains during a blizzard, they expected to find wreckage. What they discovered instead was something no one could prepare for: a private jet filled with frozen passengers, a sinister briefcase, and a truth too horrifying to ignore. The night was colder than usual, the kind of cold that cut straight through bone. Officer Mark rubbed his hands together as the radio crackled to life. A faint distress signal had been picked up from deep within the mountains, strange, fragmented, and unlike any routine emergency. Dispatch explained that locals reported hearing a thunderous explosion hours earlier, followed by silence. No survivors had been spotted, no wreckage confirmed. The storm made aerial searches impossible. Mark's jaw tightened as he listened. Something about the call felt wrong, too sudden, too vague, but ignoring it wasn't an option. Rex, his German Shepherd K9, perked his ears at the sound of urgency in Mark's voice. The dog paced eagerly, sensing that their night was about to change. With snow already blanketing the roads, the journey would be brutal. Still, Mark tightened his coat, grabbed his flashlight, and looked at his partner. "Let's go, boy," he murmured. Together, they set off toward the unknown. Snow whipped across Mark's face as he trudged forward, each step sinking into drifts that swallowed his boots. The wind howled like a living thing, shrieking through the jagged cliffs. Visibility was barely a few feet, but he pressed on, guided only by the faint coordinates from dispatch and the trust he placed in Rex. The German Shepherd led the way, his nose low to the ground, paws moving with uncanny precision through the blizzard. Mark knew better than to doubt him. Rex's instincts had saved lives before, and tonight, they might be their only hope. Still, unease gnawed at him. Every shadow looked like wreckage, every gust like a warning. Then, through the veil of snow, Rex stopped abruptly. His body stiffened, ears standing tall. A low growl rumbled in his throat. Mark followed his gaze, heart pounding, until he saw it, twisted metal jutting out of the white landscape. Smoke curled faintly against the storm's fury. The wreckage of a private jet lay shattered before them, silent and waiting. Mark's boots crunched over scattered shards of metal, each step echoing in the unnatural silence. The jet's once sleek frame was now a twisted carcass, its wings snapped like brittle bones. Snow clung to the fuselage, painting over the streaks of fire that had licked the surface hours earlier. Strangely, there were no signs of life, no cries for help, no bodies in the snow. Rex circled the perimeter, nose twitching as he sniffed the icy air. His ears flicked back, tail rigid, his low growl reverberating against the wreck. Mark had learned to trust that growl. It meant danger. But here, amid the storm and the wreckage, the silence was more terrifying than any sound. He shined his flashlight through the broken windows, its beams slicing through the cabin's shadows. Torn seats dangled from their bolts, luggage spilled across the aisle. Yet something gnawed at him. Everything looked frozen in place, untouched by panic. It was as though the passengers had vanished into thin air. Mark's throat tightened as Rex barked sharply, claws scraping against the frozen ground. The dog was staring at the cabin door, hackles raised. Whatever answers lay inside, Mark knew they wouldn't be comforting. Mark steadied his breath as he approached the mangled door of the fuselage. Snow clung to the edges, the metal warped and rusted from fire. With a grunt, he pulled it open, the hinges groaning like a warning from the dead. The air that escaped was stale and bitter, carrying the metallic scent of smoke and something darker. Rex stepped forward first, his paws careful but confident. The shepherd's nose twitched, every sense alert, his body tense as if walking into the unknown. Mark followed, flashlights sweeping across the wreckage. Seats were torn from their bolts, luggage scattered across the aisle like forgotten memories. Oxygen masks dangled overhead, swaying eerily with each gust of wind that slipped through the cracks. The silence pressed down on them, suffocating and absolute. Mark's chest tightened as he moved deeper into the cabin. The beam of his light caught on something, a faint glimmer reflecting from the far row of seats. Rex let out a sharp bark, his hackles rising. They weren't alone in here. Something, or someone, was waiting in the shadows. Mark's flashlight steadied on the far rows, and his stomach clenched. The passengers were still in their seats, dozens of them, sitting upright as though the flight had only just ended. But their faces told a different story. eyes frozen wide open, mouths slightly parted, each expression captured in sheer terror. It was as if death had struck mid-breath, leaving horror carved into their final moments. Rex whimpered, the sound echoing hauntingly in the cabin. He crept closer, nose twitching, tail tucked low. Mark moved slowly, scanning the bodies. None bore wounds, no signs of fire or struggle. Yet their skin was pale, their bodies rigid, frozen solid as though time itself had stopped inside the jet. A chill ran deeper than the storm outside. It wasn't just the cold. Something unnatural lingered here. The beam of his flashlight passed over a young woman's face. Her eyes, wide with terror, seemed to follow him. Mark forced himself to look away, his pulse pounding. The silence was unbearable, as if the cabin itself was holding its breath. Then Rex growled, low and sharp, staring toward the cockpit. Whatever had happened, the answer waited up front. Mark edged toward the cockpit, Rex padding beside him with ears pricked and muscles taut. The door hung loosely on its hinges, scorched and splintered from the crash. With a push, it swung open, revealing a scene that froze Mark in place. The pilot sat slumped forward, his hands rigid, locked around a black briefcase as if guarding it with his last breath. Mark pried the case from his grip, the pilot's frozen fingers snapping away like brittle twigs. Setting it on the console, he flipped the latches open. Inside, instead of valuables, lay a stack of strange documents, pages filled with cryptic codes and unfamiliar stamps. Nestled beside them were several small glass vials, their contents a cloudy, unearthly liquid that shimmered faintly under the beam of his flashlight. His throat tightened. This wasn't cargo meant for an ordinary flight. Whatever these vials contained, they were dangerous, too dangerous to belong on a passenger jet. Rex barked suddenly, his eyes fixed on the rear of the cabin, body trembling with unease. Mark's instincts screamed louder now. The crash wasn't an accident. Someone hadn't wanted this plane to reach its destination. That Rex's bark grew sharper, echoing through the hollow cabin. His body lunged toward the back rows, nose pressed to the floor, tail rigid with urgency. Mark followed quickly, heart pounding, his flashlight cutting through the darkness until it landed on a figure slumped between two seats. Unlike the others, this one moved. Barely. The man's chest rose in shallow, ragged breaths. His lips trembled, trying to form words that seemed stuck in his throat. Mark dropped to his knees, shaking him gently. "Stay with me," he urged, his voice steady but tight. Rex whined beside him, pressing his nose against the man's shoulder as if begging him not to slip away. Finally, the man's eyes fluttered open. His gaze was wild, haunted, and filled with terror. With the last of his strength, he clutched Mark's sleeve and whispered, "It wasn't an accident. They didn't want us to land." His voice cracked, fading into a rasp before his body went limp that Mark's blood ran cold. Someone had caused this crash. And the truth was far more terrifying than the storm outside. Investigators moved swiftly, but the grim truth became clear. This wasn't a tragic accident. The evidence pointed to sabotage, and the briefcase's contents hinted at secrets never meant to reach their destination. Mark stood in the snow beside Rex, the storm raging around them. The dog leaned against his leg, eyes still locked on the wreckage as if sensing the horror left behind. Mark exhaled slowly, his breath fogging the frozen air. Sometimes the dead couldn't speak, but the truth still screamed louder than words.